Dr. Teresa Larson. I'm the host of this podcast, and we have a very special guest, Jenny LaBaw, who is on. And I thought she was in Montana, but all along I had this dream that Jenny was running into the mountains in Montana. But meanwhile, she is, where are you living right now?
I am currently in Northern California, Chico, California.
She's in Chico, California, and
but I've been to Montana and it's beautiful.
So my dreams were shattered. No, so good to know. Well, so you're living in Chico, and you literally built a house on top of a gym.
Yeah, well, sort of.
Explain that.
I'm going to make a really, really long story short.
Okay.
My boyfriend of 11 years was a pro water skier, and he worked for Mastercraft, and he was building boats, and he wanted to not live in Tennessee and build boats. He brought him back here where he's from. So we put this big, massive 3,000 square foot metal building up. And the house that we were renting in Chico got hit by a car. We lost everything. Literally, it was a tiny house. Everything was ruined. We lost everything. So we decided that expedited our building process. So we built a loft inside of the metal building. And then I built a gym underneath the house. So now I run my gym out of my house.
That's awesome. Well, when I'm up in Northern California, and anyone listening, you need to come visit Jenny. And all of her contact information was in our intro, and it'll also be in our show notes. But I want to just share with you guys a story of how I met Jenny and why it's been a long time coming that I've wanted to run this podcast. And the reason behind the My New Normal is you can also listen to that. That is a separate show. But I met Jenny when I was training at my first CrossFit gym, Invictus, when I first got out of PT school, and there was an athlete camp, and remember Kelly Starrett was there, and I was helping him with some stuff, and I met Jenny, and I'd overheard her, I think, sharing with a friend about having a seizure disorder and how that has affected you, how it affected her, but she's still training. And actually, I think around the same time, or maybe it was a couple of years later, you also broke your foot during the open leg or something, and then you did the whole open on one leg. I was like, who is this lady? So I met you briefly at the Invictus camp, and I was like, yes, you're a badass. And then I saw the whole story of you going through the open. I managed to do it on 2 legs and struggled. You did it on 1. And I was like, oh man, this lady is a lady I've got to be friends with. So long story short, I never really got to know you that well, but I was in touch with you here and there. I know through the Strong Women Summit that Steph Gaudreau put on, her first one a couple of years ago. And then around my book launch, I had to look into the community, and I'm not I don't stalk the internet too often, but during my book launch, I needed to ask women that I admired to help support my book. That's part of that whole process. And that was kind of scary for me. It was the first time I actually really besides writing the damn thing, had to go.
Amazing.
Huh? Oh, thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, amazing.
It was the first time I really put myself out there, and but I also then had to ask people to help me launch it. And so Jenny was one of my strong woman influencers, because honestly, Jenny, your message is just about resilience, getting after it. Don't let anything stop you. I know we're going to get into her story of when she had a diagnosis, what it was like as a young child, all that stuff. But what I really knowing about you now, what I really liked about your story and you is that nothing stops you. You're doing things you love. Well, I know it's been a hard journey, and no one else can empathize with that but you. Really, no one else knows what that's like. I think that the fact that you just keep going and not be held back by this thing that the medical industry has told you have, and that you've struggled with, because so many people, I'm a physical therapist, so many people have small injuries, right? These temporary ones, and it takes them out of what they love to do. They stop doing what they love because someone told them to stop squatting. Someone told them to stop CrossFitting, skiing, whatever, because that's how they hurt themselves. But you never let this stop you. and it's something that's going to be with you the rest of your life. And that takes a resilient mind. Like that takes a resilient mind and a resilient body. And that resilience just doesn't happen overnight. So like what we're finding, and for those of you that have listened to this before, you've heard how I describe adaptation. Like we're all adaptive, and there's a spectrum though. So like we all either have had loss in our life, an injury, maybe temporary, some permanent. And what happens is your body, how you grew up, the people you're around, like the things that you've been able to, do in your life to kind of help you get past these hard times, like that doesn't just leave you. So like you take all that with this injury that happened or diagnosis, and it helps you cope, helps you get through it, because you're still the same person before the diagnosis as you are after. You're still the same person after as you were before. So like, but you still have a choice to either optimize your new adaptive self, or you have a choice to maladapt. So and I know that sometimes after a big situation, maladaptation can happen, but, and that can happen for a period of time. But what I have found with the most adaptive humans is that happens for a very short time. They snap out of it and get back to searching for how to live the most optimal adaptive life. So with that being said, Jenny, maybe you can paint a picture for us. First, I think the most important question is like, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were like 8 years old?
Well, when I was in 6th grade, which isn't 8, but when I was in 6th grade, we had to take an autobiography, and I still have it. Terrible picture on the front. It was like this padded notebook with like ruffles on the side. It was very, very creative. But on the inside, it said that I wanted to be an Olympic track star.
Awesome.
Granted, I'm not even close to fast enough to making it there, but that's what I wanted to be. Oh, and I also wanted to be an oceanographer, but I'm deathly afraid of the ocean.
That's awesome.
I just like the name of it.
And so
I still don't know what an oceanographer does.
Yeah. Well, something to do with the ocean. That's
right.
I can think, yeah, I'm also not a big fan of water. I think when I grew up, so when I was little, it was a transformer. And then for a while, because I just was like, those things are cool. They can change into people and then trucks. But the other one was a firefighter, but I am also afraid of fire.
Oh.
I like heat, but yeah, so no firefighter for me. Okay, so tell us where you grew up and how you got to Chico, not Montana.
Yeah. I grew up in a really small town called Rifle, Colorado, in western Colorado in the mountains. And I spent my whole life outside playing, hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, all of the things that you do in the mountains. And ended up going to school in Iowa, still not Montana, but I went to college in Iowa. And then when I got back to Colorado after school, I was running a gym, doing my thing. And one of my clients met this guy at a water ski retreat, and it just happened to be Marcus. And she said, you guys would have a lot in common. And this is before texting and all of that. So it was straight phone calls that we got to actually get to know each other. He lived in California and I lived in Colorado. And for 3 months, we talked on the phone and email. And then he showed up on my doorstep and said, we both, our jaws just dropped, and it was like immediate love. And
that's awesome.
About 6 months later, we were living on the road, teaching people how to water ski, and I was training people on land. We did that for 2 years, and then we ended up landing in Chico, and we go back and forth between Chico and Colorado now.
Okay.
Yeah. So
doing land and sea. So
yeah.
Does he still teach in the water too?
We live on a ski lake, so
okay.
I walk out my door to the water, but he doesn't coach a ton. He's getting back into it. He does more. He's an incredible, talented videographer.
Oh, that's awesome.
Filmmaking, yeah.
Well, so anybody listening, Chico, so what's the name of your gym? I know you do one-on-one clients, right?
It's called The Ridge, but yeah, there's zero advertising, doesn't have a website. It's just organic, yeah. So
if you did want to work with you, it would be through private password website. No, you have to email you, send a Raven.
Yeah. And I do a lot of remote stuff too.
Then potentially. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So we know what you wanted to do when you grew up, know where you live now, got your grid coordinates. Tell us about your adaptive journey. So biggest thing, like I said, adaptive, everyone is adaptive. It means change. However, there were key things in your life that have happened that have like changed how you had to advocate for yourself and pretty much the course of your life. And so what I want to know is what are those key things, those big moments that literally changed the course of your life and how you saw it?
Yeah. There's a lot of them. Like you said, that's so hard to even, it's like
It
every,
is.
like you said, every year you're like a different you in a good way, you're always growing. But I would say the big one, which you touched on, when I was 8 years old, I was diagnosed with simple partial gelastic seizures, which is
Mhm.
simple partial means it comes from part of your brain. It's not the whole brain. And the gelastic part means it's very rare. You laugh when you have a seizure. So when I was 7 years old, my parents remember me sitting at the dinner table, we're eating dinner, and I would just grab my arm and start laughing really hard. And they thought I was just being a weird little 8-year-old, 7-year-old girl. And it just happened over and over again. And one day I was swinging around on the monkey bars outside at the playground, and I fell and went face first into the gravel. And I got super embarrassed and jumped up because I didn't want to be anybody to think anything was wrong. And those things started happening a lot more. And so
Yeah.
my mom is a nurse, and she obviously was thinking, okay, what's going on? And this is in 1990. So this is before there was the internet to get on and just start searching everything, which probably was a
Right.
good thing.
Mm-hmm. Google, Dr. Google's, yeah, Dr. Google
Dr.
sucks.
Google. Dr. Google is terrifying, but
Yeah.
yeah. So she went to the library and was like microfishing things and talking to doctors that she knew, and ended up getting a bunch of testing and poking and prodding and all of the things done, and being diagnosed with simple partial gelastic seizures at the age of 8. And epilepsy is, it's getting better, but there's a massive just stigma around it where, I mean, it started way back when that people thought you were possessed by the demons, and there was, just all sorts of bad things, or there was something, people thought you're a weirdo, something's wrong with you. So
Right.
I didn't tell, and I lived again in a small little cow town in Colorado. I'd
Yeah.
never heard of it. I didn't have any friends that had it. So that I knew of. But
Right.
we held that as a secret by my choice. My parents respected that. Obviously, my teachers knew, but and my coaches. But the doctors said, just like you said, like, hey, you have epilepsy. You may not be able to play sports. And sports were like my life. Even then, I was such an active little kid, and there were all these things that I couldn't do. And my mom and dad were just amazing, and my older brother. And they said, Jenny, like, why can't you, and I find out now as I'm starting to advocate and talk about this, my family has been terrified my whole life.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they know what could happen, yes, there is that scare, but they never let me believe that. So when you talk about resiliency, without them, no
Right.
freaking way. Like I would have listened to the doctors, maybe, who knows, I would have,
Right.
not to say that the doctors aren't right and they don't have reason to say that stuff,
Sure.
because everybody is different. But in my case, it wasn't true. And from the age of 8 to the age of 14, I fought trying to find medication that would work. And for anybody that's ever been on a anti-seizure or neurological medication, it changes who you are.
Yeah.
It made me really, the side effects can go on and on and on. I can't even count how many medications or medication combos trying to find what would work.
Right.
But eventually when I was 14, I landed on one that did work. And it worked from the age of 14 to the age of 31, when then I tried to change my medication for being able to carry a fetus, because the
Right.
medicine I was on, I couldn't. So the medicine is, honestly, when you think of epilepsy, for me, and I'm very lucky, again, with the simple partial, there's 40 different types of epilepsy. So some
Right.
people think of epilepsy, you think of someone falling and shaking and losing control of their body.
Right.
I do have that kind. It's called tonic-clonic, but I have a constant, like, now that I talk about it, I feel it, but 24 hours a day, I have a tingling sensation in my right arm. So it's always there.
Okay. Got it.
And when a seizure comes on, that intensifies and I just can't use my arm. So.
And how often, so if you don't mind us digging into real quick before we get into the actual epilepsy, like what it feels like for you, what it's been like is, so before you had this, your family, you have an older brother and parents who were very loving. So it seems like a very loving, supportive environment with good friends around you. And you're involved in sports, which is, I think, are super important for kids, and not just in small towns, but all over the place, to find, like, I think sports is life played out loud. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to share, how to be a team, how to get less focused on just you. So a great thing, just thinking about the whole, finding out about this seizure disorder and continue to play sports, like you're focusing on other people, you're focusing on, things you love, like that is super, super important to feeling good and being happy. And not just after diagnosis, but just in general, like ways to cope. Activity is a great way to cope with any kind of stress. So with the epilepsy, so you talked about when you laughed, you'd feel seizures. So is it when you laugh, or is it?
No. So that's the seizure. So the way it works, there's that constant tingling sensation when a seizure is basically misfiring in your brain, which is like an electrical storm in your head.
Yeah.
So when that would happen, that sensation in my arm would go up. And so the doctors, when I was a young girl, said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, where is it at? And usually it's around like a 2 or a 3. But when a seizure comes on, it's like 7, 8, 9, like, oh my goodness, here it comes. So when that would happen, I also would start laughing sometimes, uncontrollably. I couldn't, that's the gelastic part of it, and usually would lose my bladder. And I would just stop and hold my arm. And I say would, it's still, if it happened today, I would still be doing that, holding my arm and grasping and trying to just get that feeling to go away. Sometimes I could stop it. That was we could feel like really focused. That was talking again about resiliency. I think when you, for me personally, but also talking to other people, when you are diagnosed or when you have something happen to you that involves your being in your body, you become way more self-aware. Mm-hmm. So talking about myself in athletics, like I think that's a big reason why I've had success in athletics and in CrossFit, is that I've been hyper aware of my body. I've been hyper aware of how I feel. Do I need to rest more? Do I need to push more? Do I need to eat better? Do I need to sleep more? Like, what is it that my body needs right now to make me be a more optimal human being and athlete? So I kind of went off on a tangent, but
no, that's actually no, but that's the My New Normal way. But you hit upon something that is very crucial that I have also found, that you are more aware of your body and you're more aware of taking care of it. So it's actually forced you to connect more, because there's this thing going on with you that maybe elements of it you can control through activity, stress is in ourselves, the way we think, what we do. I mean, we you think of stress in general, like we hold it in our body physically and mentally. So learning how to let those things go can only impact what you have underlying. So epilepsy disorder, like that, and I'm going to generalize that term as we talk, just to keep it, but it helps you. I mean, you're going to be able to, this is forcing you to be more connected now. And I find with people so you can go one of two ways when you get a big diagnosis like this. Maybe it's for someone that's lost a leg because of type 2 diabetes, or it's someone in a wheelchair after spinal cord injury, or someone who has a mild TBI from a car accident. Like, those words are scary, but if anything, it can help you learn more about your body and be more connected. Mm-hmm. And that's the choice. That's, I think, the exciting part about these big things that happen to us. Yes. But the majority of what we do after that thing that happens, we can choose it to be very healthy, and we can choose it to change our life for the good. So, I think that's amazing. Like you're like the things that you've done in CrossFit. So name off, just for the listeners, because a lot of the listeners aren't necessarily CrossFitters. Like what?
I'm not really a CrossFitter either, by the way. Like, we'll talk about.
Yeah, but like some of the athletic feats that you've done, I'd love to hear a little bit more about just the things that you've done since. I mean, you played sports when you were young, but through CrossFit, and what other sports do you like to play?
Yeah, so I went to college and played soccer and softball originally. So soccer was my main sport, and softball was kind of for fun. And it turned out that the softball team was just a bunch of partiers, and not that that's bad. I just wasn't there, so I wanted to do
Yeah.
something different. So this is where my Olympian track star came
Yeah.
in. I started running track to get faster for soccer. So in college, I was a three-sport athlete. I ran soccer in the fall, indoor track, and outdoor track in the spring. So busy all the time while getting a degree, and it kept me out of trouble probably. But we had a great team. On soccer was the main focus, and I did well. Ended up getting some all conference stuff there. But then out of college, and then you hear this story over and again with collegiate athletes or even high school athletes. Once that's not a part of your life, you don't have that team. There's this kind of, I wouldn't say I had like a loss of identity. I just had this loss of, I was missing the competition. Like I didn't change my identity, but so I ended up getting into some running, and I ran some 5Ks and 10Ks, and I did some half marathons and one marathon, and ended up deciding I would never run a marathon. I qualified for Boston. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm done. I'm not going to run any more marathons. So, which is funny as I talk about something else that I did, but then I got into track or into CrossFit, and that was probably right near when I met you, because it was I started in late 2010, early 2011. And
Yes.
in 2011, I was lucky enough to make it to the games and got sixth that year. And then in 2012, I made it. I won regionals and got back to the games, but another detrimental thing is I was battling a neck injury, and which took me out of
Right.
competition. So that year in 2012, I ended up withdrawing halfway through the games on Saturday because my neck was, I have C4, 5, 6 bulge, and it was just super flared up. I couldn't use my arms really. So decided it was probably smart.
Yeah. Time to take a break.
Yeah, so
Good.
did that, and then 2013 I broke my foot. That's when I didn't make it past the open because I was on one foot. 2014 I went back to regionals and got eighth, and that was just a year that I decided was going to be my last year no matter what because of my neck, and
Yeah.
decided to stop competing. So, and then in 2015 is when I did the most impactful thing I've ever done in my life, which was a charity run I created called Move Mountains, and I ran across the state of 500 miles across the state of Colorado for epilepsy awareness. And that was where my advocacy for epilepsy really became a more prominent thing in my life.
Yeah, and I believe, so I want to dig into that a little bit towards the end,
Yeah.
because I find, and that's where I think probably 2015, 16, actually, when I was just writing my book, when I started to get into the social media world and I started seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew, I mean, before that, I'd met Jenny, met you in the CrossFit gym at Invictus, but like just meeting you, like, there are certain people that just stand out to me. And I remember when I went online, I was like, what is this lady up to? She's on the Women's Strength Summit too. And like seeing your work, seeing the amount of miles you're running and for what cause, I was like, oh yeah, we got to stay in touch. But I want to learn more about that too in a second. There are a lot of tangents that go on in the show, and I'm the queen of those. But I think that there's a lot of value in that because this is a conversation, and people listening are people who have invisible wounds and might not be the same as you, but have them. And there are people who have wounds that people can see. And what I have found is that the invisible wounds can impact people even more because people don't see it. And so let's say one of my athletes with a TBI he's experienced a limp and he can't see very well. He experienced migraines, like he looks normal, but there are things that affect him in a workout or in the gym that a coach will see and doesn't know what to do with that, or people will see him limping and, you know, I don't know, just there, it's a different approach that people take when people don't see it versus when people do actually see someone in a chair or with the missing limb. And so I want to kind of dig into when you were in high school, in college, were you still not telling people about what you had, or did you tell your coach? Did you tell close friends?
So my coaches in college, my coaches and teammates knew, at least on the soccer team, and my coaches for track. And I didn't want to do that, but for safety's sake, I needed to do that. So if you talk about maladaptation, that is where I did not adapt, is that I was so afraid of people being treating me differently and thinking when they find out, oh, this person that looks totally normal, she's a whack job, you know, that's what I thought was going to happen. And man, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with her. And all of a sudden you lose your community and you lose what you've worked for and you lose this part of you, which I find out is absolutely not true, but a big part of what kept me from telling people. So to answer your question, coaches and close friends knew for safety's sake. And they also were very respective. You know, they didn't ever they didn't ever make it known or tell other people. They just would always check in and make sure I was okay. And we had like a little signal if something wasn't good on the field that, hey, I need to come out. And
Right.
And it worked great.
Now so you shared with your coach and close friends. Now, when you were playing sports or in college, did you experience, like, how often do you experience seizures, and what are they like in your experience?
So when I was younger, I was having them all the time. And by all the time, I mean several times a day. And there's 40 different kinds of, they call them the epilepsies. So there's 40 different types of epilepsy. My one in my arm is my prominent one, the tonic-clonic, where you fall and shake. I've only had one of those, and that was when they took me off my meds for 2 weeks and I was in the hospital and they were testing. So that was one ever when I was 14 years old. There's also a kind called absent seizures, which I have not been diagnosed with, but a lot of people around me are like, Jenny, snap out of it. And I am like, so I don't know if that's a thing or not. Yeah. So to answer your question, I don't really know.
That's a mom brain. Maybe you have a dog. You have a couple dogs.
I do.
So you're the mom of some dogs. Yeah, that's just normal.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Normal life.
Okay, that's great.
Maybe.
Hopefully, yeah. But no, now I'm really I haven't had a seizure for 4.5 years now, which is great.
Wow, and you're not on medication, right?
That's a whole new story. Yeah. As of 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years in January. So yeah, a little under 2 years. I have not been on meds.
And what was the decision? How did that come about? That's amazing.
Okay, let me preface this with a little disclaimer.
Yes, of course.
This is on my own. This isn't for anybody else. Yeah. Please talk to your doctors. Don't follow my lead.
Yeah, of course. Good call.
Yeah, but okay, so again, a long story short, I was on Dilantin, that medicine, from 8 till I was 31. And when I was 31, I know that Marcus and I wanted to have a family, and I couldn't carry a fetus with the medication I was on. So I went to a neurologist here in Chico. I didn't have a neurologist at that point because I was very under control. I didn't need to see anybody at that point. So found this guy, the only one available. He helped me titrate to a new medication that is good for carrying a baby. And through that titration phase, it was rough, but I did it without having any seizures. But my lifestyle was greatly affected. Marcus found me sleeping on our garage floor. Like, I just had zero energy. I remember getting out of the truck to come upstairs, and I laid down and he found me an hour and a half later. I just could not function in life. I had no energy. And so I went into him and I said, hey, this has been great because I haven't had a seizure, but I cannot live the life that I want to live like this. I'm a zombie. And so how do you feel about working with some lifestyle changes and tapering off the meds a little bit? And by that, the ketogenic diet, which is the big craze now, actually started in the 20s as an epilepsy therapy. So yeah, that's what it kind of came about as. So that's a one way of going. I said, I can do that. I can go low carb. I can go no carb. I can do whatever you need. Like, let's work with diet. I've got the lifestyle stuff under control. We can keep in touch with that. And the doctor looked at me and he said, no, 1,000 milligrams is therapeutic and that's what you need to be on. And I looked at him and I said, I really appreciate your input. I'm never going to come back here again. And I walked out the door. And without telling Marcus or without telling my family, because I knew they would all say no, I started to slowly wean myself off my meds. And when I was at half dose, so 500 milligrams, I decided I probably should tell somebody. And when I did, I didn't drive and I just was very safe that way. But I weaned myself off until I was at 0. And that was a year, almost 2 years ago. So.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've been seizure free. And that's, again, please don't go do that.
Of course.
Please.
Yeah.
Everybody's journey is their own journey. But I also, again, am, like I said, hyper aware of my body. And I've been doing this since I was 8 years old. So I kind of have an idea of how it works. So. Yeah.
So yes, of course, everyone's journey is their own, but I think it's a true testament to you and the ability to connect more with your body and mind, and what you be very intuitive of what you need.
And
Um,
I think if I can interject something is that if you are going to take anything away from that is to be your own advocate, because
yes,
they're I love the medical community. If it wasn't for medicine, I would not be alive right now. None of us probably would, right? But there is a point when if you don't stand up for how you feel and how you want your life to be, and push through the things that you know that you personally can push through with the agreement of a medical team that can support you through that, or some type of a team that can support you through that, you can't rely on the norm because you're not normal.
right.
You're you
Yeah.
know that.
Uh,
So be your own advocate, I guess.
I think that's been a pretty strong message through, well, just the work I do with Movement RX, to be
Good.
honest. Like, we have a little online community, and the biggest thing that comes up is, how do I advocate for myself with a coach and a doctor? Like, what are things to ask? And most adaptive athletes that I've started to work with and got in touch with, to include my partner, who taught we created the functional training for the adaptive athlete, that online course that we have on Mobility Wad.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is like, so he's got this, his name is Max Conserva, and he runs goodleg.org.
Mhm.
Amazing human. But the prosthetic orthotic field, so he has a salvage limb. He was hit by a semi when he was 8. And so he has a very complex salvage limb. His limb isn't cut off, but his limb is there, and it's very deformed. So he has to wear an orthotic. But orthotics, like prosthetics, there's much more research and thought that goes into prosthetics versus orthotics. He wants to snowboard, he wants to CrossFit, he wants to do these things that are high impact, but there really aren't orthotics. That he found that there really weren't orthotics that would support him. Like, his orthotics were always breaking. So he had to go in and advocate for himself a lot. And like, literally, he brought his tools in and started working with his prosthetist, orthotist, and created his own orthotic,
That's so cool.
which was super awesome. So it's a CAFO that he's in, a knee, ankle, foot orthotic. And but he taught me a lot about self-advocacy. And most of the athletes I've interviewed thus far too, to include, I just interviewed Jill Miller, right? And she had the more invisible wounds, like me too, and you, just different, very different, obviously, wounds. But she is all about that too. Like, don't wait for a doctor. Like, the medical system is there for a reason. But be your own first line of defense too. Like, do self-care and do all of the things. Like, you already had the lifestyle things down, you have the community down. A lot of people don't have that. So
Right.
get those in line. Like, find the people that care and love you. Find find a movement exercise of some sort that fills your cup. And then, don't change your meds yet, but like, start to work with your doctor on those things, especially if they're not making you feel good. There is a way. There are probably other medications you can find that your doctor and you can work on, and or eventually get to where you are, where you're ready, you're so in tune with your body, you know that it's time to go free from it.
Right.
But and Jenny, honestly, when you were talking about that, it very much resonates with something I recently have done that I haven't talked about yet. Because I don't have bulimia anymore. I still struggle with minor depression and anxiety. And I was talking about this with Jill, but she also experienced some similar stuff, and she had an eating disorder as well. But those things, that's still in my cells. That was still in me. And like, I found myself, now that I'm a business owner and I have a child, like, every few months I was hitting these major lows, and sometimes I couldn't even explain why. And so this is kind of going into the self-advocacy thing, because depression right now, according to the World Health Organization, is it's like the biggest cause of disability in our country.
Wow.
So there's a lot of Americans that have it. And like, I'm not, it's not something that I'm excited about. Like nobody's excited to
You're
be,
frozen.
oh, okay, hold on. Better?
You're back. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So depression isn't like, it's just not fun to talk about. It's hard to ask for help when you feel low. Um, and anyway, so I was still struggling with these lows, and going to the Veteran Administration, they'd always prescribe me antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds. And while I took anti-anxiety for a short period of time, I stopped late last year. I actually took it all through pregnancy because I was still hitting those lows, and like I was having a hard time functioning during those times. And people knew that. Like I would be pretty open to my close friends and family about that. And I'm I am all about not just talking about what was positive, but like life, like fuck shit, life, stuff happens. But anyway, so I started learning about hormone therapy, and I realized like, dude, from loss to the Marine Corps to explosion exposure, like I was a demolition expert. Like I didn't have a traumatic brain injury, but I was exposed to a lot. And I'm a sensitive human. Like I've learned over the years, I'm a sensitive human. And I'm an empath. Like I care about what other people feel. I want people to feel welcome, and my feelings get hurt easily and all that type of stuff. So I went and got my hormones checked by an actual functional medicine doctor, concierge, because the Veteran Administration was like, why do you want to get your hormones checked? Like you're not menopausal. It's so effed up in a lot of ways. They're like, well, why not? Like, research shows that hormone therapy can be super impactful to mood. And if you've been exposed to any kind of trauma, most likely your hormones have been downregulated. Right. So I got my hormones checked, and sure enough, a lot of them were tanked, and have been on hormone therapy for the last 5 months, and no medication, and have been super mellow. Like not mellow as in like I'm, how antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds can make you feel, not make you feel, it doesn't allow you to feel. Right. No, I feel normal. Awesome. Like I feel like I can, get through things easier and meditate easier. And like my lifestyle stuff was there, but my chemical makeup was just off. Yeah. And so, but I had to like pay out of pocket and advocate for myself. And I still have to advocate for myself with this functional medicine doctor. Mm-hmm. So it's, long story short, like it's not easy. I mean, you've had to go against the grain and tell people no, and use your gut instinct. And that's essentially a very common theme with the most adaptive humans that I've come across.
And we're also in a really, that's awesome. Sorry to like just move on, but
no,
that is so yay for you. And I'm so glad you feel good. That's great.
Yeah.
But we're in a time where I like, Google, it's the worst thing for you. It also, this podcast right here, hopefully this is going to help somebody. Like there's so many resources out there. Advocacy just isn't, this is how I feel, now go to a functional medicine doctor and tell them to help you. But get on the internet, listen to podcasts, find reliable sources and articles, and learn about your body, learn how it works and learn why it works, and take that in to have an educational conversation with your functional medicine doctor or with whoever your team is,
Educate yourself. You become a student of your body. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. Like the internet can be scary, but find good resources. Like I learned about hormone therapy through Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan podcast. Yeah. And then I actually did go to a doctor who worked in my same office complex, and they come to find out they only look at a few hormones. They didn't look at everything. And then I found out, well, why didn't you look at everything? And then I found out that's their marketing. They make more money that way because they tell people that you have to be on hormones forever. And I was like, why am I aligning with this company? And so had to make a shift. They worked in my same office complex. So I tried them out. And then I realized, okay, this isn't going to work. And oh, by the way, I'm moving my business to another place because I can't align with that. Like I need to work with someone who is looking at the whole person.
Mhm.
and looking at all of my hormones, precursor hormones. And so it was because of that podcast that someone told me to listen to for one of my athletes that I was like, that guy, he was talking to Dr. Mark Gordon and the Warrior Angel Foundation guys. I was like, those are my symptoms. I need to check this out.
That's awesome. Good for you.
So yeah, it's so self-advocacy and podcasts, like you said, and I hope this one, what I want for this one is for people to listen and know there is another way and know that they can live an optimal, they can find this optimal new normal they're in. That it doesn't have to be, I have this scarlet letter of a diagnosis and that's my life and I can't do the things I want to do and my life sucks. That happens a lot. And
Yeah.
I hope, and I know that even I hope that other people who have epilepsy too, or any kind of progressive neurologic condition or neurologic condition that's not progressive or traumatic brain injury, um, can know that they're not alone, to
Right.
kind of find tribal members through this media source as well. So with your Move Mountains, let's get to that. Like I want to learn, I want you to tell us what that was like building that and why you came up with that concept. And me thinking that you're from Montana, like how perfect. You're not knowing that you were from Colorado.
All right. There's
Colorado's
mountains
a lot of
there.
mountains though. And so does Montana.
Yeah. So to kind of go along with what you were just saying is I hid my epilepsy for so long. And
Yeah.
through CrossFit, I developed a little bit of a platform and people were following what I ate and my lifestyle and all of this stuff. And it was when social media was just becoming kind of a bigger thing. And um, Marcus, who was in his beginning stages of filmmaking, said, hey, he's like, this is right before the 2012 regionals. He said, this is a great opportunity for you to share your story and make an impact. And I reverted back to that 8-year-old girl and I looked at him like he was insane. And I was like, no, I'm not telling anybody. I'm like, finally, people are going to think I'm weird, you know? So he's like, well, let's just make the video. And if you like it, then we can share it. So I'm like, I can't argue with that. So we made the video and it brought me to tears, like bawling tears. And I said, you're right. Like there's no reason for me to hide. And if I change one person's life because I put this video out in a positive way, then it's worth it. So I put it out just a few days before the 2012 regionals, and the response was just overwhelmingly positive of people from all walks of life reaching out and saying just what you said, like, oh my gosh, I felt so alone. I can resonate with this. I have epilepsy. My sister has epilepsy. I have cancer. I'm going through a TBI. Like all of these things that people have, just what this whole podcast is about is we all have shit that we're dealing with, and we all have things that we hide, that we're scared of, that we are lost with. And to have somebody to share that with, even if it's somebody you don't know on the internet, is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And what I was super surprised about is I felt this freedom for the first time, and like this big, massive weight lifted off my chest for the first time in my whole life. And that was scary.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Really, really scary. But also I knew at that point I had to do something bigger like this. It just can't be a story and then be over. So was still very much involved with myself as an athlete at that point. So not a very good time to be able to give what I could to a community. Because to be a successful athlete, you have to be a bit selfish. So
Sure.
in 2000, after 2014, when I decided to quit competing, I knew I had to do something different. And Marcus and I were watching a documentary on Terry Fox, who is a Canadian. Do you know Terry Fox? Do you know the name?
No. I mean, I've heard the name. I haven't watched.
He's
So.
amazing. So
Okay,
Terry
I
Fox,
will.
he was a Canadian who in the 80s was diagnosed with osteosarcoma and ended up having to have his leg amputated.
Oh
And
yeah. Okay.
he's like I didn't know this at the time, but he is a massive hero in Canada apparently. So he attempted to run across Canada, the entire country, not just one little part of the state, but
Canada. The whole
Canada.
That's amazing. Canada.
And he was in it for cancer research and cancer awareness. So when I watched that, Marks and I watched it, we looked at each other and I was again just crying because that's what I do. And
So do I.
again, there comes that empath again. But I was like, okay, I know what I'm gonna do this. And so we were driving to Colorado that next summer in June, and I looked at him and I said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run across Colorado for epilepsy. And I immediately called Brian McKenzie, who, if you don't know him,
Yes.
he's a great dude, but he is an endurance wizard. And I told him what I was going to do, and he said, all right, well, he's like, I'll program for you. He's like, well, and I said, well, I don't want to do this all year. I don't want to train all year for this. I don't want to run that much. And he's like, well, have you ready in 2.5 months. So from the concept coming out to finding myself on the Wyoming border, the New Mexico border of Colorado, there was a 2.5 month period. And the planning, I mean, it was all right here on the computer I'm talking to you on, it was just emails and trying to get contacts and planning the route and trying to work full time and also train full time and get connected with a foundation that we took donations for. And there was a lot of planning, but it all happened just how it was supposed to. And it took 31 days to run 500 miles up and over the Colorado Rockies. It was like eight mountain passes. I think I forgot all the stats. It was like 880,000 steps or something crazy like that. And
did you have like a Fitbit on or something tracking?
Yeah. It was great. And it was day 2, I got really bad blisters on my feet underneath my toenails. So the entire time it took a mile before every day. I was like, just go numb. And my feet would go numb about a mile in. And yeah, but it was, that's the physical part of it, right? Just being able to push through that. And that's, again, when you have a purpose, when you have a why, when you have a reason to do something, your body's going to do it. Yeah. Your body is a machine. Your brain is the control. So if you can find, whether it's a new job or moving to a new place or a new mindset, whatever it is, if you want it and you really, really believe in yourself and have a community behind you, you're going to make it happen. So yeah, it's great.
So where can people, I think that's amazing. I mean, saying it's like running across Colorado. Yeah, well, Colorado's a shit ton of mountains and beautiful. And the fact that you have blisters day 2 and you felt that the entire time, you just keep going. I think that's the beauty of doing something, getting yourself out of your comfort zone and doing something physical. It allows you, what I know about the mind is you can heal the mind through the body in terms of mental health struggles, right? But like you also are at a place, which I think is amazing, to finally share your story, which is that vulnerability is super powerful. I have found too, because I was very scared and embarrassed initially. And you're also, so you are showing, you're giving to others, which is a way to help eliminate your own suffering that you have. And you're giving a voice to others who may not have one, like struggling with epilepsy, like struggling with any other invisible wound is like, can be very lonely. And so seeing someone like you who is so humble, so driven, and not a selfish person at all is like very inspiring and very motivating. And I think people who have watched your movie, and if they haven't watched it, we'll have to get them to see how they can. Like if you have a video of it, or if there's a website, maybe it's your website. I remember watching it through Instagram and I think Facebook too. But I just think that we need more people out there like you doing this kind of stuff. And I hope that anyone listening can know that they're not alone. And that even if you don't have epilepsy, that kind of taking your energy and character that you hear from the show and added it into your own life, because giving to others some way, it doesn't have to be running across Colorado. It could be going for a run in support of MS, or going for, supporting the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. Like it could be anything, but just doing something that doesn't focus on you. It focuses on helping others. That's what can help eliminate suffering, is what I've found.
Beautiful. It's so true. It's so true. And I feel so fortunate and so lucky for my accomplishments in my life. I feel but that hands down is the most impactful thing I've done personally, but to other people, like all around on every aspect. mentally, physically, spiritually. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but the most
Yeah.
rewarding thing I've ever done. And I think you hit it on the head. It's because you take the ego away, you take the selfishness away. And when you're doing something for somebody else, you're indirectly doing something for yourself,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And it becomes this beautiful, healing, blossoming,
Yeah.
awesome thing. So yeah, it's you can't. And I talk about me doing this, but it wasn't me that did it. Marcus was with me every day. I had a good friend who's a massage therapist that worked on my legs till the muscles gave every single day. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Her dad was there every day, helping to make sure that we were on the right route. And my parents were in and out, and my dogs were with me. Talk about healing. My dogs were there to cuddle every night. And the community online of, I got to run for people every day. I asked people, if you want me to run, people are reaching out. I'm like, can I please run for you or for your daughter or whoever it is today? And
Yeah.
I've still kept those connections. And still, I have not done a very good job in the last few years of being still proactive and I work for the Epilepsy Foundation now, but as far as keeping up with my Move Mountains website, it has not been, I have not been as good as I could, but there's still people that are reaching out every single day on Facebook or Instagram saying, hey, I just saw your story. Thank you. I'm 28, was just diagnosed. I'm lost. I don't know what I can do. And this has given me hope, so even if you do that one run for lymphoma,
Right.
that is a ripple effect. You do one thing and it will keep going. That is not just a one and done thing. That will keep going and impacting and impact. You impact another person, they impact two people, they impact two people. And it just is you doing one thing is a very powerful, powerful moment in time.
Yep. Well, where can people watch this? Is there any videos that are still up?
So my website that I used was labawlife.com, and
Okay.
I haven't been active on it, but I blogged every day. And
okay.
so
So you can still go back and
there's videos on there. And
okay.
Yeah, those are there.
So with, if you were to give advice, to someone who, let's say a 10-year-old version of yourself, who's maybe had the same diagnosis, recently, or a parent who has a child that has the same diagnosis, what advice would you give that child or parent?
Yeah, so the parent and the child are two different people in this, two very different people. I would say for the parent, don't forget to give to yourself. Being a caregiver, and that's something I'm finding talking to my parents more about it, but talking to other parents in this process is you want to give, it's easy for you to give to your child, but if you're not giving back to yourself in all of the self-wellness ways that you can, you're not going to be as good of a caregiver as you could be. So by giving to yourself, you're going to be better at helping your child. And also being gentle on yourself. That's a big thing too.
Sure.
For the child, or adult, whoever's recently diagnosed, learn from my mistakes and talk about it, because carrying that weight on your shoulders for 27 years isn't happy or healthy for anyone,
Yeah.
Or for 1 year. Talk about it, even if it's to your best friend on the phone, or if you find an online forum chat group of people that are going through it. You don't even have to talk to somebody, but you just read through it and you're starting to see those relations and seeing that you're not alone. It's really important.
Yep. Very true. And that was well said. Last and final question of this for you is, what is your normal this week look like? What does a day look like for you? What is it? Yeah.
I got a lot.
Life.
Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
I coach. I just have been going. I started coaching. I got up and I worked out at 6 o'clock. I coached from 7, and this is not ideal, by the way. Let me throw that out there. I coached from 7 till 11. I shoved some food in my face. Really, 11 o'clock. I was on a call for the Epilepsy Foundation before this. Then I'm on here, and I'm currently going back to school to become a nutritional therapy practitioner. So the rest of the day involves studying and being on webinars, and then I'll take my dogs for a walk and eat dinner and go to bed.
That's a beautiful new normal. Yeah, I found through asking that question, it's just life. Life is happening.
It's crazy.
My today is very different than what tomorrow is going to look like.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. I'm so honored.
Your energy is amazing. Everyone, you'll have access to I'll put some of the key things that we talked about in the show notes. You'll get, if you're willing to give your email out, we'll put that in there. People want to contact you. And Y'all can follow Jenny. She's an inspiring, amazing woman. And please, if you found something, you got something from this, share it with people you love. You may know someone who has epilepsy and or an invisible wound. So please share this. When is it my turn to get away? Do you feel like everyone